Okay, yes, if you'll go to the link to log in for attendance, I usually just pull it up through the email you sent out, Joy.
Oh, yes, I forgot.
Yes, it's perfect. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. I think Miss Breeden may be doing lunch with the gym girls. She was in the design lab. And today's meeting will probably be brief, just like last week's meeting. And the gist of today's meeting is to look at our action plan for fourth grade. And to start that plan, I looked at the SMART goals that we created during our last two PLCs. And then I want to share an update of an idea that I want to do or not do with the survey that we talked about. Last week we looked at some online resources, and we discussed the online resources that the teachers were currently using, and we talked about doing a survey to see which online resources that they were using, to see the resources that they liked. But then the more I thought about that, if we're developing our strategic plan and we want them to use Freckle, then if they do the Freckle, the 20 minutes a day that we're asking for as a district and as a school, if they choose to do those other resources in addition to, then that's just gonna be on them. And if we still think we need to do the survey, just so we'll have that data and that information, I will create one. But I didn't create a survey because our plan is going to be that they use Freckle and not those other sources. So I took the information that we had on our SMART goal sheet, and then I added the online piece that we talked about at our last meeting and came up with the strategic plan to present. So everything that we've discussed is all on the newsletter. And in doing the research, it kind of solidified some things that Ms. Childers and I talked about as we were creating our action plan to share with the district. The strategic plan has to include some of the components that we've already listed on the SMART goal. So there's some pieces that we'll be adding into our presentations. But the first bullet that I will read that to you in doing research, I found another acronym that pretty much gave us confirmation as to what we talked about with our SMART goals, that we're on the right track, we're doing the right thing. But the acronym that was new to me that I found was the VMSOA, and that talks about setting your action plan by having a vision, a mission, objectives, strategies, and the overall action plan. And I feel that we have that in the things that we've already discussed.
Will you say those again? Vision, mission?
Objectives, strategies, and action plans. Okay, and at the bottom of the newsletter, those are the 3 areas that we listed that we were going to work on when we created our SMART goals. One was the core instruction. We talked about doing PLCs, making sure that we're using the state resources, the NC tools for teachers, making sure that the teachers are teaching the standards, and then also modeling that throughout the PLC. And number 2, we looked at doing the math journals with the teachers doing the problem of the day, using the CRA mat with the manipulatives. And then also the third one that we added on after our last PLC was Freckle. So we're gonna be asking the teachers to implement that 20 minutes a day. And when we did our first SMART goal sheet, I kind of jumped the gun and started this process before it was actually due and before my professor said, okay, yes, now you may present it to your team. So this is the official presentation because it's been approved now through my class. So our start dates will be the same that we had on the initial SMART goal worksheet, but they're gonna be on that second page. But before we turn to the second page, on the right-hand side of the newsletter, I've listed the short-term goals. We had to include midterm goals, and I don't think we had that on our first SMART goal sheet. And then we included the long-term goal. You want me to read those out, Joya?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, so,
You want me to?
no, I was asking if you wanted me to read that out so you can type it
I got it.
in the notes, and if I need to stop or slow down, just tell me to. So we'll actually start this official plan on Monday, the 25th, and we'll end with the short-term goals March the 8th, and then we'll come back for our PLC, and we'll look, and we won't meet next Friday. We'll come back, I don't even know if the 8th is on a Friday, let me see. But the next PLC that we meet on, we'll be discussing our data that we pulled through our walkthroughs, and I'll look at that in a second. Yes, so March the 8th is the Friday, so we won't meet next week, I get to take a break. And then we'll come back March the 8th and look at the data that we have, share any concerns that we've noticed, and any next steps that we may need to plug in to kind of tackle those concerns before we get to the midterm goal and the long-term goal. Any questions, suggestions, or things that may need to be revised just from that first portion?
I think it looks good.
Okay, and then the second sheet. And I'll forward you this document too, and I may see if I can print it. Number one, to post in here so that we'll have it as a reference when we meet. And also, I would like it to be a little bit bigger in font. But the items that we had to include on our action plan for our class included many of the pieces from the SMART goal worksheet, but there were a few pieces that may not have been there. So we have the specific activity that we'll do first, and the first one is that common core instruction, focusing on core instruction, making sure they're using our common core standards. The short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals have been plugged in there. And then the people who will be responsible, it will be our leadership team, the fourth grade teacher, which will be, I don't think I need to say her name, but our fourth grade teacher. I don't think there's anybody else. Anybody else you can think of that may be a part of it? Something that we do need to talk about is over in the last column is the progress monitoring piece. Will it be feasible to have a TA to go in to assist with that piece? Or I may need to add that under resources, is thinking about the schedule that the teacher has now. It's kind of a tight schedule before they have to rotate with those other two classes. So just thinking about the reasonableness of her progress monitoring, the students will need it. I think I need to add that under resources. Support with progress monitoring. What do y'all think?
Are you using Ames for progress monitor?
Yes.
It's,
Mhm.
I mean, it's all online, it's just a matter
So
of
the
clicking
students
start.
can just get on it once she assigns it,
You just
okay.
have to assign it and unlock it, the same as the benchmark.
And I know you signed up for a session to do, you remember?
The 4th maybe? Not this coming week, it's the next week.
Okay, so March 4th. Okay, so I need to make sure you know that one too. That chart, okay. So all she would need to do was to make sure that the students had time with in their rotations,
Mhm.
that they know when you go to this rotation today,
once a week they progress monitor.
Wait, stay in there, and wait 1 second. So once a week, okay, okay, so that sounds better.
But the students need to understand that it is a progress monitor and not just an online assignment.
Okay. So do we need to add, under persons responsible, do we need to add the students? So that they know that they're accountable once the teacher explains to them that this is progress monitor. Once you get to the station, you have to do this first before you do whatever other activity she has. Well,
Do you
maybe
think
not.
progress monitoring should be done at her small group? I mean, I know that's probably not, will she do it once a week or?
Lauren said once a week.
It takes about 5 or 10 minutes.
So could they all do it when they come to the guided math table?
In the time that she would typically do the intervention, it shouldn't take any longer than the intervention would have taken.
Okay, so that works.
I think that having somebody there might,
Mhm.
make them feel like it's more.
And for those that need the read aloud, she can watch, make sure they're actually pushing the button to have it read to them.
That's good. Okay, so the progress monitor will be done once a week at the guided math table with the teacher. She'll do it during the traditional time that she would do the interventions. That way the students will be monitored. Anything else I left off? I feel better now. Got that part. And then under the resources needed tab,
So this is scheduled to start next week. Are the progress monitors set up in Ainsworth?
so maybe we need to revise that date, then instead of saying the 25th, she's gonna have to have time to set it up. Let's see.
What's the,
Monday's date is the 25th.
how long is it, what does it entail?
It is
Setting
not,
up?
it's very quick, I mean, to
Is
set
that
up.
something we can go?
Yes,
and
we
do?
can set it up for her as long as she understands how to administer.
Okay. And I could ask her if she could stay with us after school Monday briefly. I think the teacher-led design team may meet Monday, and if we do, if we can meet with her maybe right before that meeting starts. Would that work? So we'll list this as a tentative start date.
She also needs to finish getting all of the assessments.
Yes, I'm gonna pull that up too in just a second. I want us to look at some of the data from the BOY and the MOY for her class, and then there's one other document that I've got pulled up for us to look at. So I'll do the testing with the students when I do my sweeps for the makeups, and then she needs to just not worry about testing. She needs to be ready to go back into her instruction mode, pulling students, so she can start that with the ones who have already tested and the ones that we already see that they need progress monitoring. And then she'll pull those other ones in as they are tested. Does that sound reasonable, or do we need to look at that start date being the following week? What do you think?
I personally think it should be next week,
Okay.
because she's still, it's Friday afternoon, she's still got kids that need testing.
Okay, so we'll revise the start date to March 4th.
And what's your PLC on what? Okay.
So that'll flow together. Now, we still can do the pieces like class visits, beginning to collect the data with the teachers using the standards to teach. And then again, I need to make the CRA mats. So we'll do the March 4th, because if they're gonna be made, I think Ms. Bryant mentioned she wanted them laminated, did she say that?
You want them to look the same,
Systematic, okay. Okay, so we'll revise that date to do, let me write it on here. March 4th, and we're looking at a 2-week window with the short-term goal. So we'll do March 4th. I think it was 3 weeks the first time, it wasn't. So we'll meet March 15th instead of March 8th.
Does that mean we'll change the midterm goal and long-term goal?
Yes.
Okay.
So if we shift everything a week, since we're starting a week late, I think we'll be in sync. So April 5th.
Go ahead.
Will be the end of the
Where are you located?
midterm goal.
I'm in the design lab with Jim. She said it that way.
Interesting.
She answered her.
Yes.
Not the same thing.
Just coming confirmation. 4/26 will now be May 3rd. And if there's testing or things that fall in that window, I know we'll have spring break somewhere in there. So we may even revise some of these dates as we go along. But this will be a fluid document that we can go in and revise as needed. But I think this helps because this gives us our vision. We know where we're going. It's gonna provide the focus that we need. And hopefully we'll see the results in the end, which will be increased student achievement. Okay? I'm gonna jump back to the resources needed section. The NC tools for teachers, the unpacking document for the math content, the resources for our class visits, and all of the walkthrough tools are all online in the Google form, and I'll email those back out. The links for those. And then I'll be able to gather the weekly data from the Google spreadsheet. Formative assessment pieces will be the exit tickets that the teacher is responsible for. They've got many exit tickets that they can use on Freckle, and then also any common formative assessments that they do in the classroom. And then our summative assessment piece will be the EOG data at the end, the final data. And with that formative assessment data, I'll make sure that the teacher understands this is not a test basically on the students. This is a test to see if they're responding to her instruction. And if they're not responding to her instruction, then we need to look at what we may need to do differently. And we set a goal before that the teacher will use the CRA mats in her core instruction while focusing on the state standards 80% of the time. And then I see that I left something off of that piece that got erased, but the strategic PLC team members will also use manipulatives when we're modeling in PLC. Now, every PLC may not be one that you're going to pull out manipulatives like Lauren's progress monitoring session. Right. So if it doesn't make sense, then we don't need to feel like we've got to run and grab something together if it's not going to make sense.
We need to keep some in here.
So we'll have them, and then some of the mats also.
Yeah.
So we'll find a place for them.
Please excuse the interruption. Please delay your lunch for 5 minutes. Please delay your lunch for 5 minutes. Thank you.
The next section is the problem of the day with their math journals, so we'll revise those. Midterm, short-term, long-term, we'll revise those goals to match the new ones that we created for the top section. The same people will be responsible, same resources, same formative assessment, same summative assessment, so the rest of those pieces are the same. The difference in the last column for the indicators of success for this one, we added fidelity checks for the math journals. The way that sometimes I have the teachers to bring in journals number 2, 4, 6, and 8. Lauren, I'm so sorry, but will you please, there's the boys eating in my room. I've seen them go out twice. And just let them know that we can see them, please, thank you. But as far as like the fidelity checks, I'll try to plug those in when I'm doing class visits. Also when they come to PLCs, and I'll just say bring numbers 3, 7, and 9.
Okay.
I'll change the numbers and choose numbers that I haven't chosen before, because I don't want them to get used to always bringing number 5 and making sure that that one is perfect. But that'll be a part of the fidelity checks with the journals. And then for the last one that we added was implementing the Freckle resource. And the remaining pieces are the same, with the exception of Freckle data being added to the resources needed. Thank you, Ms. Cook. And Freckle data was added to the formative assessment method. We'll be looking at the end of the year to see growth on the EOG based on what they've implemented through Freckle. And the goal will mirror the first two with the 80% of the teachers using that Freckle in their classroom. And I'm going to also add, that is, it's there, data from Freckle. I was thinking about the fidelity checks. I didn't see the word fidelity check under that section, but if we're looking at the data, the online data I think will give us what we need. Or do you think we need to add it to when we walk through, making a note on the walkthrough tool that the students are in stations doing Freckle?
I think if you're gonna do a fidelity check, you need to do it online through your admin. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
Just going through there.
okay. I'll make this bigger. Okay. So any questions about this action plan?
Okay.
It was kind of birthed through our SMART goals sheet. Any pieces we need to add? Thing to think about on the from the teacher standpoint? And I think just kind of creating the focus and creating the awareness from the teacher standpoint. And this will give me time to sit down with the 4th grade teacher and to go over this and to help her to see this is not a check on you, but this is helping us to develop a system that we want to implement school-wide. And I honestly think we talked about, implementing this school-wide. I don't think we need to wait to the end to start it. I think this is our controlled test group, but I think we really do need to present this, and we might can talk to Ms. Bryant. I'll share this at the leadership team meeting too, and then we can talk about maybe presenting this at the next staff meeting or the leadership team design meeting to see when we can come up with a plan as that team to get a start date K-5.
I would like to mirror this in reading in kindergarten. similar to this, because I think we need.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, and if you think of something later on and say, oh, we might need to add this, or oh, we may need to do this a little bit differently, just let me know and we'll go in and continue to revise as we need to. That's painless, right? Oh, no, glad I did that. I did want to look at, I was gonna share this with the leadership team meeting today, but this data here shows preliminary data based on the students who tested already, and then some of the students I still have to take out, but in looking at what we have with the students who tested so far, we can look at fourth grade to see that 13% of the students were well below grade level, 19% were below grade level, 57% were average, and that's a good chunk. And if we look at all of the grades, K-5, that is a big chunk, but that's a large range too in that little green section. So we don't want teachers to get the misconception that, oh, we're doing pretty good, they're in the green. Well, we don't want them to fall back as easily as they're in that wide range.
Is green, yeah.
And then the above average is the aqua kind of blue color. Fourth grade was at 11%. And then well above average, they have 0% there. And the total number of students who were tested, and that's on the list so far, is 54. And we have several more to go. So we're gonna work on doing the makeups next week. So by that March meeting, when we come back to look at our data, we'll have this data for sure. And then there's one other piece. This report is part of what I'm gonna do when I do the PLC meeting with the teachers Monday, is drilling down and looking into their data. There's a report that'll show the skills that fall under concepts and applications, and this will be refreshing for some of the teachers so that they'll see that everything that they're doing is not in vain. Like they can see for fractions and decimals, fourth grade has gone from 29% to 34%. And they'll still look to see what they've taught and what they haven't taught and gauge themselves that way. And then for number and operations, 47% to 60%. So that's a huge piece to celebrate so that they don't feel so defeated. And then problem solving, 31 to 30%. And as I looked at some other grade levels, several of them went down there. And I know some of them are doing the math journals. So I expected it to be a little bit higher, and I'm sure they would too. So the next step is going to be to expand, to look down at the question types to see why several grade levels went down in the area. And I just expected the opposite. And then for shapes and measurement, 35% to 32%. And I have a different slide show that I'm gonna share at the leadership team meeting, and it'll show how we can expand, click on the question, and then see exactly what the question was. So I think that'll be beneficial for the teachers. So that's a report that'll be new to them, and that'll help them guide their next set of instructions. And we can do that for each piece. So that was concepts and applications. And I know kindergarten had a lot of questions about the types of questions the last time. So all of their questions will be answered for sure that they wanted for the BOI. And this one, mental computation fluency, just shows the skills that were assessed. Then we can see the areas that they may have gone up, the areas that they did not go up. And it shows the same thing for the number comparison fluency. And then one last thing, and I promise I'll stop. I'm interested to see, they all had to set goals for a middle of the year target. So I want to see how many of them met their goal. And that's another piece that will be a piece of celebration for them. But then they can set hopefully a higher goal and see if we implement this plan, that we'll be well on our way. All right, any questions?
No.
All right, thank you. And I'll make sure that I email this link to Ms. Bryant and Ms. Breeden.